stay this weekend. I just asked him what he wanted, and he said shorts and
TikTok,
shirts.
time to rock.
How you doing?
Good, how are you?
How's it going, everyone?
Hello, everyone.
Looks like we're live. Our faces always show up, but there's still a part of me that's always paranoid that we're actually not live, and until I actually see us live, I was always worried.
Everyone says we're live, so
All right. No, I see our beautiful faces. Hey, we have cool colors on. The colors complement each other well. I like this cool. I don't know what this is, maroon or something, and you have that cool bluish color.
I have very cool colors.
All right, everyone. How's it going?
Hello, everybody.
I'm not terribly crazy about talking about terrorism all the time, but we have got a problem on our hands. Are you aware of the problem there, AP?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Absolutely. We have several problems. We have a huge problem.
Seems to be the thing that I've always worried about, right? Because historically, after every Islamic terrorist attack, historically, everyone, we're always told that Muslims are going to be the real victims in this attack because everyone's gonna go and start slaughtering Muslims. And it didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and it didn't happen, and you had tens of thousands of terrorist attacks, and there was just never this massive anti-Muslim backlash that everyone was warning us about. But at the same time, I was always thinking, man, if you keep pushing people, eventually they will. You will eventually start having other people taking up terrorism as their methodology, because you had the IRA and stuff like that way back in the day. But then when Anders Breivik came out and he did his attack in Norway, and he specifically said that he learned from watching Al-Qaeda and the reactions to Al-Qaeda, he learned that is the way to get your message across, that these deadly shock attacks are what make everyone stop and pay attention to what you're saying. That was terrifying, because here is someone who doesn't believe in Islam, doesn't like Islam. He was an Odinist, a white supremacist, and he's saying, those jihadis actually have it right. And the horrifying thought is, what happens when other people start doing the exact same thing? Hey, if I want my point across, all I have to do is write a little manifesto, go slaughter a bunch of people, and for the next 24 hours, everyone's going to be reading my manifesto. That is the quickest way to get my point across, right? They don't have to spend years building up a following on YouTube to get their message across. You could just do it like that. You can do it. You put your manifesto on a site, and you go kill a bunch of people. And that's the terrifying thought, that would catch on as a method. And it looks like we might be right in that phase where you have white supremacists and anti-Semitic people, and of course the classic jihadis, all competing for attention by how many people they kill. You seeing the same thing I'm seeing here?
I do. Well, we see also that people's voices are shut down. We are being shut down when we talk about these issues, when we are trying to be reasonable, when we are really trying to talk about these things in order to prevent violence, because we are against violence, in order to set things straight, in order to really be able to talk like adults. And when that doesn't work, if that is really, shut down and it doesn't work, then people resort to such actions that should never have happened, that should never happen, that shouldn't ever happen in the future.
Yeah, it's a really, really scary situation, because, as you pointed out, if their solution to this rising tide, and notice the tendency is never to shut down Islamic speech. It's not, hey, we have to silence all Muslims. It never crosses anyone's mind, and I hope that it doesn't. I don't want Muslims to be silenced. If you can defend your position, let's see you defend your position.
Absolutely.
But when it comes to white supremacists and people like that, then they say, here we need to ban this speech. But when they do it, they don't just go after white supremacists. They go after anyone they happen to disagree with on any issue, right? And they lump everyone together, right? If you disagree with us on abortion, we're lumping you in that category with white supremacists and alt-right, white national. We're lumping you all together in that category. And if you're a critic of Islam, if you criticize Islam, no matter how peacefully, if you criticize Islam, you're in that same category as well. And so this is pretty scary problem here.
It is insane. I mean, it goes to such lengths, such extents that I mean, everyone sees the irony here. I don't even have to say that. We don't even have to talk about it. But an Islamic terrorist attack occurs, and as you said, no one is blamed for that. You know, after an Islamic terrorist attack, no one is blamed for that terrorist attack. No one has to fear repercussions. No one has to fear being shut down, have their voice silenced, or that in any way coming back to them. But if a white supremacist, if a white nationalist or self-proclaimed white nationalist attack occurs, then it is really everyone. It is. It's not even critics of Islam. Mm-hmm. Not even necessarily those who have a political opinion. Mm-hmm. It's directly the people who share the same skin color. It's directly the people who share the same religion, who come from the same part of the world, who remotely stand for the same thing, completely naturally, without ever having a choice in that. It is insane. I mean. The thing is, it is in our hands, in the hands of Europe, of the Western people, of Western companies, of companies that are based here in America, based here in the West. These companies should be understanding that that speech is invaluable, that speech is important, that we just can't shut down these things, because free speech is what leads us to solving problems reasonably instead of killing each other, instead of mass shootings and suicide bombings and other bombings. But sadly, with all our great values, with all our, how nice we are to each other, we also have this attitude that we feel guilty collectively. Many companies, many our culture, those especially who are in the West, those who establish these companies, those who lead these companies, those who work at those companies, constantly have this feeling that we as a people, as a whole, we Western people in the West, are collectively guilty for whatever happens to the other, and that's why all of us need to be punished when something happens to the other. It's I want to lead this to something that I have just checked as we were talking. I was looking at the list of Islamic terrorist attacks this month in April. We have a total of 119 Islamic terrorist attacks in the world just in April. Right now, 766 people died. In one incident, on average, six and a half people died. 6 people died. But yet, when an attack happens from a self-proclaimed white nationalist or white supremacist, we immediately go and say, "Oh no, look. This is a problem. This is a huge problem. This is a global problem. This is a serious problem. This is the end. This is the worst thing that could happen. We need to crack down on this. We need to stop this immediately. We need to find all those who are guilty. We need to find all those who are responsible for all of these things, for this one white nationalist terrorist attack that has happened. We need to find everyone that could remotely be held responsible for this and need to shut them down." But we don't even care about this number of 119 attacks in April.
Yeah, yeah, and again, it's what if a white supremacist or a white nationalist does something, it would be one thing if you said we're going to shut down white nationalists or something like that. But again, it's everyone gets lumped together with them, so everyone starts getting shut down. But I mean, think about it, right? Because I think white nationalism is stupid. I think white supremacy is stupid. But if I wanted to deal with that as an issue, it would not be by silencing people who have that position but don't advocate violence, right? Like you can have a white nationalist who's going around saying, "Oh, all white people need their own separate area, and we all need to move there." They're not, they're not advocating violent terrorist attacks or anything like that. They're just saying, "Hey, we need an area just for white people," and they're calling it, and they believe that they will ultimately achieve that, like through political means and stuff like this. That the world will be divided up into certain areas and stuff like that. Well, I think that's I think that's dumb, but I would never cross my mind to say, therefore, that person needs to be shut down in silence, because as you've already mentioned, what really happens when you start doing that, right? That person, right? That person, as dumb as I think his views are, still believes in getting his message across peacefully, not through violence. Once you silence him and you eliminate the possibility of him ever talking his way through this, one, you also eliminate any chance to have a discussion with him or to convince him that he's wrong, right? Because the people who are advocating just silencing anyone they disagree with, notice they're not changing anyone's mind there. And then we lose the ability to even change their minds, right? Because if that guy's out there running his mouth, if he eventually annoys us enough, we start responding to him, right? And we start saying, okay, you made this argument, that argument, this argument. Here's why your arguments are stupid, right? And then maybe he sees why his position is stupid. Even if he doesn't, other people see why his position is stupid, because other people are watching these exchanges and these discussions. So notice, given that system in place, you can actually make progress, right? When someone says, oh, you're a racist, I'm shutting you down, you're banned from the internet. Now there's no refutation. This person then gets to go out and say, hey, guys, they can't answer me. They can't answer me. That's why they had to shut me down. And this person now no longer believes that he can get his message across peacefully, and the chances of that person turning to violence just went through the roof. And again, we see this. Anders Breivik said this. Anders Breivik said it in his manifesto. He said, "Hey, I saw all kinds of problems with Muslims in Europe, and I saw a problem with the teachings of the Quran and the Hadith." He was saying that this was during the 90s that he saw these problems and so on. And he said, so I thought about going into politics and dealing with it in the realm of politics. But I realized that all anyone's going to do, as soon as you say, hey, guys, I feel like, our future is in danger with the pace of immigration here and some of the things that these groups are bringing in, the ideas that they're bringing in, I think these are dangerous. He said, as soon as you say that, people just call you a racist. Now, it's ironic that he did become a racist. He did become a total white supremacist and so on. But at first, he just wasn't thinking like that. At first, he was just thinking in terms of, hey, we got a problem. Should I deal with this politically? And he concluded, no, I'll just be silenced and marginalized. And so the only way to get my message across is to do what Al-Qaeda does. Therefore, I'm gonna mimic Al-Qaeda and go on a killing spree, and people are going to read my manifesto. And he believed that would influence other people. And what's crazy is now it's happening, right? It's happening that other people are saying, hey, Breivik, he got it right. I'm going to go kill a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. That's terrifying.
I think even the Christchurch shooter, Brenton Tarrant, he said the same thing in his manifesto, that he would love to change things in a democratic way, but apparently it's not possible because you will be, cut off and shut down and whatever. And he therefore said that democracy doesn't seem to be a reasonable way to the solution at all, and he wants to take a different path, which is of course a very horrible path. It's absolutely horrible. It is disgusting, but yeah, that's how they behave. I mean, I imagine this whole situation like when they shut down speech. I imagine this like a room or a community of, let's say, 500 people. And they gather in a room every now and then, and in this room there's this one person who shares his opinion about a specific thing, and his opinion just sounds so sensitive to most people. And the leader of that community, because this guy has that opinion, instead of arguing with him about it, instead of discussing why his opinion is wrong and how he could improve his opinions and his mind, the leader just tells this person to shut up and be quiet. So when that person can't really discuss the whole issue and can't engage in a discussion where the opinion of both sides, of either side, could be changed, that person won't just stop having the opinion that sounded so offensive in the beginning. That person will probably seek different ways to express their opinion, whether they are peaceful or not peaceful. He could resort to violence. He could create his own community and voice his opinion that is not accepted, that people don't want to hear in his community, but he will still keep having that opinion. So if people have a serious problem with opinions, no matter how harsh those opinions sound, they should be able to sit down and discuss those opinions without name calling, without shutting down, without just making it impossible to discuss. Mm-hmm. But there's this one thing that I see. I don't know. I want to ask you what you think about that. I mean, when people hear of these thoughts, of white nationalism, of a country for white people, or the future of white people, or we are being replaced, and all that stuff, white genocide, whatever you want to call it. When they hear these opinions, we agree that it shouldn't be shut down, although we don't really agree with it. But when regular people, when the mainstream society sees those opinions, they are kind of afraid of what such talk leads to. They are afraid that it might lead to things that we have seen in the past, like Nazi Germany, for example, or other societies, other problems where such things occurred, or Italy, for example. They are afraid that that if they just let those white nationalists speak, then they could spread their opinions to other people. They could become more, and eventually we would end up in a racist, totalitarian state where minorities would be gassed and killed and whatever. People are afraid of that. Should they really be afraid of that? I mean, do you really think that concern is reasonable that people have?
I understand being concerned about individuals spreading their message to other individuals. As far as thinking that, we're going to have it's about to break out into Nazi Germany-esque violence. That's just total nonsense, right? I mean, in the early, I know this because I recently made videos with the KKK, about the KKK, with where the KKK converts to Islam and stuff. So when I was on the page looking it up, in the early 1900s, there were 4 million people in the KKK in the United States, right? So 4 million. That is a huge, massive, massive number of people. And that's why they could get people elected to power and things like that. Now I think there are like 8,000. What large-scale group is there that can do that? And what group is there that isn't looked down upon by just about everyone, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it would be one thing if people said, I'm really, really weird, I'm really weirded out by these guys, and I'm terrified of these guys, and so I want to take steps to ensuring that these guys never take over. It would be one thing if I could take you seriously because you said that, and you also said, but there are 1.6 billion Muslims, and a significant minority of them are advocating violent jihad, and so I'm going to be consistent here, in every group that has a sort of a significant violent minority, even if most of the adherents are peaceful, if they have a really dangerous ideology in terms of it, it could lead to violence for some of the adherents. If people are consistent, I would at least take that their position seriously. But it's with the people who are calling for, white nationalists and white supremacists and stuff to be banned and deplatformed and so on. They're just never consistent. It's, here's this group, and this group we have to worry about taking over. But this group that is actually massively, massively large, you're not talking about 8,000 people like you have with the KKK. This group over here, you're a racist if you have a problem with it. You're a racist if you have a problem with this group. This group that, hey, these guys, these white supremacists, man, that guy just did something on the other side of the planet in New Zealand. And then you had another one in California, who we'll be talking about this in a few minutes, who attacked a synagogue. So you see, this is massively widespread. What about those? I think you said 119 Islamic terrorist attacks just in the month of April. What about those? No, you're a racist if you have any problem whatsoever with those. And so it's just massive inconsistency and hypocrisy. I think what it is all of the people in these groups who are having people silenced, they're allied with Muslim speakers and Muslim organizations and stuff like that, right? So they love Ilhan Omar and various other Muslim speakers and so on. You can't come out and say anything against Islam. Whereas the white supremacists and the white nationalists, they have no ties to them. At least some of them I think are very racist, whether they realize it or not. But they have no ties, so that's the one. It reminds me of, there are like certain churches where like the only sin they emphasize is the sin of like gay sex, right? And why always that? Like gluttony is a sin in Christianity. Why aren't you talking about all these other things? And I think the reason is, if you're talking about other sins, there are people all over the church who are doing those things, right? Half that church is going to go out and be gluttons after that Not not in some horrible sense. They're having a they're having a celebration, stuff like that. That's fine. That's biblical. But anyway, the point is, a lot of people are doing a lot of things that they're not supposed to be doing in Christianity. But most of the congregation probably isn't doing that one thing, and therefore that's the thing we go after, right? The thing that most of us have no connection to, because it's safe to talk about that. You're not going to step on any toes.
Yeah.
I think it's something like that with the left and white supremacists, right? Any other group that you're going after that's becoming radical and violent, you have associations with them, you have ties with them, and you're going to risk dividing your group if you start talking about those things. So you just turn a blind eye towards those. But white nationalists, hey, we all agree those guys are weird. So we can target them. And that's the problem. And very, 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 very sad situation here.
Absolutely. You made a good point in how the population that supports such ideas is not really big today. I mean, when we talk about Nazi Germany, for example, they even make a comparison today and say Hitler was also only one person and the Nazi movement was also very small. But it's not entirely true. The Nazi movement was small. Yes, it was a minority. It was a small party, but they had a lot of people who agreed with their ideas. They had a lot of people who thought just the way they did. We don't have a lot of people today who really believe that we need to punish certain groups and exterminate certain groups, label certain groups, and so on. People in America always have this this Democrat-Republican divide, but most Republicans in America don't have the view that all the minorities, that all the Muslims within the country are dirt and that they need to be thrown out and exterminated or whatever. It's just not true. We have very, very few people who really think that immigrants, all of them, should get out of this country, who really think that all Muslims need to be deported immediately. There is a very tiny number of people in this country who really call themselves alt-right because they are alt-right. I don't even want to say the term because this term is a joke. The term alt-right is a joke.
It's thrown around more than like white nationalists, right? Again, like I watch Tim Pool videos, right? This guy's on the left on most issues, but just because he calls out his fellow people on the left, and especially people who are like extreme left, he calls them the regressive left. Just because he calls them out, they call him alt-right when he's not. He's on the left, right? So they just, anyone who, which it kind of makes sense. They call anyone far right. And the reason is and Roseanne brought this up on a talk show. She was on like Jimmy Kimmel or one of these shows, and someone said, hey, how are you on the right now? You used to be on the left. She goes, my views haven't changed. Your views have changed. You guys went so far that way that I'm now on the right because you went so far that way. And so if you think about how far off in left field people are going, any normal person who's anywhere near the center is now far right to them because they're so far that way. They're so far over there. And so that is the situation we have. I'm very much a centrist, but I'm pretty liberal in my political ideas. But I can bet you I would definitely be called, at least right wing, but definitely also far right and alt right. I have been called that already, and it's ridiculous because I have positions, or many people who are called alt-right, who are called even right-wing, a very mild term, are people who would just be called liberals long ago. But as you said, they changed. And me, I don't have firm political commitments on most issues. Most issues, I'm like, I don't care that much. You guys figure it out. People who actually deal with that can figure it out. I'm against abortion, so that's like one thing where I do have a firm commitment to. But for someone to say, far right because of that or something like that, that's like basic right. And it's one issue among a lot of issues where there are other issues where I'd be like, situations like prison reform and stuff like that. I'd kind of be on the left on some of the issues like that. So, but according to anyone, if anyone we're paying attention to this discussion right now, no, we would both be far right, just in terms of, it's just amazing that now anyone who actually believes in, has a robust view of freedom of speech and is at all critical of jihad is now far right. So disturbing times.
We must be Nazis.
Yeah.
Someone brought up Joe Rogan. I mean, Joe Rogan is a total
Yeah, he's on the left, yeah.
Left, but he's called alt-right. And when people say no, but he's totally left, then they say, well, he's an enabler of the alt-right, which is basically the same. It's crazy. Anyway.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. All right, guys. Well, we're only planning to go an hour tonight. It's we're 25 minutes into it, so we got a little over a half hour left. So we basically just wanted to go through through a couple of these stories because people need to pay attention to the trend that's going on because that is scary, right? It's one thing if you have jihadis going out and waging terrorist attacks, right? That's bad. Government organizations, government agencies need to do everything they can to stop them, and the rest of us need to deal with the ideology. We need to be confronting the ideology. If then you have anti-Semites and white supremacists, all of a sudden they start blowing people up and shooting people. Man, if this gets worse, and I mean, it seems like now every couple of days we're hearing about a terrorist attack by someone. Now, if you pay attention, if you're paying attention to what goes on in Southeast Asia and Africa, if you really pay attention, there are terrorist attacks every day. I'm talking about the terrorist attacks that are right here, right here in America or in New Zealand, Europe, and stuff like that. They're happening left and right, and it's not just coming from jihadis anymore. And so the point here is things can escalate very, very quickly, right? If you have, and I've used this point in the past when talking about situations like in the Middle East, where we take out Saddam Hussein, and then we can't figure out why people start blowing up each other's mosques. Well, there's a reason. Those people already wanted to start blowing up each other's mosques. They were just scared of Saddam. Then we removed Saddam. Now, suppose you just had like 1% of the Sunni population and 1% of the Shia population that actually wanted to get violent. You say, they're a tiny minority of people who are actually violent. Well, if that 1% of Sunnis then goes and blows up a Shia mosque, that 1% of Shias who wanted to get violent now just shot up to 5%, right? And so then there's going to be a retaliation. Well, then the 1% of Sunnis who wanted to get violent, that tiny minority, all of a sudden that shoots up to 5% or 10%. And now you've got terrorist attacks left and right. Pretty soon it's 40, 50, 60% of the people who are calling for violence on the other side. Well, I've used that in the past for situations in the Middle East, but guess what, guys? You can have that right here, right? You can have tiny minorities of the population who are actually violent. And then all of a sudden, when their group starts getting attacked and killed, then that percentage shoots up, right? Now it's more people calling for violence. The point is, if everyone's attacking everyone with terrorist attacks, that can just go like this, boom, 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 and all of a sudden, epic bloodbath, and that is pretty scary. All right, so we're gonna look at some. We're going to look at some of the situations. I'll have AP. Let me just hit 2 comments right here, and then AP, you can recap the Sri Lanka terrorist attack, and then we'll just look at a couple excerpts here from some articles on some of the recent attacks. And as you pointed out, there have been over 100 Islamic terrorist attacks just in April.
Yeah, 119 as it seems.
119 Islamic terrorist attacks just in April. So obviously, if we're talking about this month in terror, we could spend the next 3 hours talking about Islamic terrorist attacks. We don't want to do that. We want to talk a little bit about it, but we wanted to look at some of these other terrorist attacks because it's getting creepy. A couple comments here. Andrew Martin said, it's astonishing that reasonable people are being censored when the head of the Muslim group in Sri Lanka was never censored by YouTube until after the explosion. And that guy was having some serious violent presentations on YouTube. And no, you have to go apparently wage jihad before they'll even think of it. And so notice, there's no one's calling for the Quran to be banned or the Hadith to be banned, even though these sources call for violence. And I don't want them to be banned. I want to expose them. Yeah. But if it were a different book, if it were some other book, if it were a white supremacist book that was calling for violence and people were spreading it around, it would be banned, right? I mean, that someone else pointed out in the comments here that the New Zealand manifesto is the New Zealand shooters manifesto is banned. It's illegal to have in New Zealand. Well, why? He's saying, hey, here are my ideas, and here's why I went out and carried the attack. Well, the Quran calls for violence. It calls for the violent subjugation of the world. The Hadith call for the violent subjugation of the world. Why don't you ban those? Total hypocrisy.
I kind of see why they want to ban it, but it's a ridiculous idea, and it's just not the right way to handle this thing.
No, I would. I mean, if I had serious, and well, our numbers are growing. Our numbers are growing. Hopefully, we get to the time when we have numbers. And AP, I'm going to say it. We're going to build a big old studio, and we're going to use that thing and broadcast broadcast all around the world. But I'll just say, if I were the prime minister, like New Zealand, or if I were the main television station down there, I would have said, all right, he put out this manifesto. Let's get some experts in here to go through this point by point, argument by argument, discuss this and get to the bottom of it and show why this guy is totally evil and a complete moron as well for what he just did. That's how I would handle that, right? That's how I'd handle it. Don't just put it this way. Anyone who wants a copy of that can still get it.
Yeah.
Right. But by shutting it down, you just eliminated the possibility of actually refuting the things that he said, because you can't discuss it, because if you do, then you've broken the law and you're in trouble now.
Yeah, that's how it should work. I mean, by banning that, by censoring it, you won't prevent most people who actually want to read it from reading it. Mm-hmm. So you should be addressing those things that people that motivated this person to go out and commit such an insanity. You should really target. You should really talk about these issues intellectually and try to, in order to influence the rest of the population in a positive way, in order to prevent such future horrid actions. You should really go into that and prove people wrong who think that way, who think the way this guy thought. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that sadly never happens. Even in America, we are experiencing so many shutdowns because of such thinking.
Mm-hmm. Comment from Anthony here. He said, "You guys are my heroes. I grew up in Lebanon during the civil war between Christians and Muslims. I experienced and witnessed Muslim terror firsthand from 1975 to 1983. So he says he grew up there and witnessed it. I'm assuming he moved to like the United States or to Europe. But notice, imagine the situation here, right? He moves from Lebanon to, let's say, the United States. And then he's seen what jihadis will do when they get power over you. And yet, if he goes around saying, guys, this is what I witnessed with my own eyes, and here's the source of it. It's because Muhammad taught his followers to do these things. He's an alt-right whack job now, right? This is amazing. This is amazing.
Yeah.
All right, so the Sri Lanka attack.
Let's recap that.
Yeah. Now you've heard, right? You've heard that it's being claimed that this is in retaliation for the New Zealand attack.
Oh yeah. It is a retaliation for the New Zealand attack. It was just so quickly organized, so quickly all this huge organization was made within a very short time frame.
And they managed to go after white supremacists.
Oh yeah.
Oh wait, they didn't. They went after brown Christians in Sri Lanka. The Christchurch shooter would have shot those same Christians, right? If they were in New Zealand and they had higher birth rates than any other group. He said that's why he went after the Muslims, right? Yeah. They were the wrong race, but that was enough. It was that they're the group that had the highest birth rates, so that's why he targeted them. If that had been brown Christians and they had the highest birth rates in New Zealand, he would have gone and targeted those. So.
Yep. He even said, "Today we are coming for them, but tomorrow we will come for all of them." Mm-hmm. So he meant he'll basically attack all those immigrants.
Yeah. So I'm not buying. I got to call bull on the claim that this is retaliation. As you pointed, there's not enough time, right? You have the Christchurch shooting, and then how many suicide bombers were there?
9, as far as I have picked up. Yeah, it's. 9 suicide bombers are known as perpetrators. So 9 suicide bombers, and the chemicals and materials to build the bombs and the detonators. And didn't they find, like, I think some insane number, like 100 or 200 or something like that, extra detonators that these guys had. Yeah. The point is, they had this plan in motion long before the Christchurch shooting. But you can always do that in the hopes of winning support from your fellow Muslims. Hey guys, this isn't us just going around killing a bunch of Christians. This is us
going and killing a bunch of Christians in retaliation for that white guy, that white supremacist who went and shot a bunch of people in a completely different country. So that's it. That's our Islamic justice, and I guess they'll get some people like that. All right. So to set things off here, what are your thoughts on the Christchurch shooting and the reaction of the West?
So the Christchurch shooting, how many people died? What is the complete total? It's 50, right?
250? Oh no, Christchurch, yeah, it was like 50.
Yeah, 50, yeah, 50 people died.
It was 49.
So,
it was 49, and then like someone else died of the injuries.
Well, it was a horrible act. We have talked about it before together here, but I was pointing out about that just before we started going live. I was talking with you about that, which I really don't know how to put, because I don't want it to sound very. I don't want it to sound very outrageous, what I'm trying to say. But what I'm saying is, after the Christchurch attack happened, we have spent so much time finger pointing, so much time, looking for all those who are guilty of this, who are responsible for this, and we talked for it for very long. And for over a week, we kept talking about it and kept coming back to it. All the Muslim activists, the mainstream media, everyone has gone out and talked about it endlessly. We had to distance ourselves from it. We had to make videos about it, because we felt that it was so relevant. It was, I don't know. But the Christchurch attack happened. It was 50 people. Muslims died. It should have never happened. It was a horrible act. Whoever did that was a complete scum of society, if I can say that.
Total loser.
Yeah. But the reaction was very, very loud and very big and very wide. But then the Sri Lanka attack happened. The Sri Lanka attack happened. 250 people died. Initially, we even learned of much higher numbers. It went over 300 or something, 350 or so. So it was then lowered and corrected to 250 because the information was initially wrong, apparently.
Well, I saw why. They said it was basically there were so many body parts all over the place that it was hard to even keep track of the correct numbers.
Yeah. Imagine. So Christians were targeted. Christians were killed. 250 of them died, who are completely uninvolved in any of those political things that are happening in the world, who are just a Christian minority in Sri Lanka. And who talked about it? We talked about it. Mm-hmm. People who care about Christians, people who care about the Christian community around the world talked about it. We talked about it for half a day, and then we forgot it. Most people who were so outraged about the massacre in Christchurch never even bothered about it. Others even wrote articles on the Washington Post saying that the far right is currently being angry about the Sri Lanka attack, that the Sri Lanka attack hit the far right, that the far right is angry and sad. They wrote such disgusting articles. The New York Times wrote something which goes again in such a direction. Many people on the left didn't even care. They didn't care for more than just leaving. Most of them didn't even leave any comment. Most of them didn't share any condolences. I mean, it was half a day and then we forgot about it. Can you see the comparison? Why? I understand that it's Sri Lanka, it's not New Zealand. Great. Yeah. But still, we are talking about
kind of racist if you care about. I mean, if you care about people in New Zealand but not in Sri Lanka, right? Like they're worth less.
Yeah. And that's kind of, I don't know, when I see this happen, I talked about this last time, but when I see this happen, that people react with such anger and such sensational speech and such doomsday talks and about how everything is horrible now, how everything will be horrible now once an attack happens like the one in Christchurch. But when an attack like the one in Sri Lanka happens, they don't even care about it. They don't even want to care about it. They even go on accusing those people who care about it of being far right. Then I just think I'm totally right in what I'm doing here. We are doing the right thing.
Oh, yeah.
We are absolutely doing the right thing, and I want to do it forever until the last person gets this, or until I'm just gone.
Yeah. To tie this into what we were talking about earlier, guys, just think about this, because this is like the main takeaway of a lot of our talks here. You had that the white supremacist shooter in Christchurch killing Muslims because they were brown and they had the highest birth rates, right? So he goes on a killing spree. He puts out his manifesto. Guys, here are my ideas. Well, guess what? Those ideas are shared by certain other people around the world. Not nearly as many as, the ideas that are shared by Muslims or something like that, but there are other people who share those same ideas. Most of the people who share most of his ideas don't also believe in going out and killing people. But the point is, he listed his ideas that are shared by others. And instead of exposing his ideas, they banned his manifesto, so you can't have a copy of it, you can't discuss it, and you can't refute it. And they started shutting down and deplatforming anyone who happens to have the same perspective as he does, right? So if you can be identified as a white supremacist or white nationalist, then Facebook started cracking down. We're banning you from here. We're going to have you deplatformed, and basically just all kinds of places on the internet. Hey, we need to crack down on these guys. We need to crack down on these guys. Whose mind got changed in all of that? No one. Now, who are you responding to? Who are you refuting? In other words, no minds have been changed, no refutations. There's nothing, absolutely nothing, to stop the next guy who has those ideas from going on a killing spree. And since now people are no longer allowed to have discussions about their views, you just made it much more likely that someone's going to go on a killing spree because of his views. So that's the situation there. And then with the attack in Sri Lanka, there, it's an Islamic terrorist attack, and it's done in the name of Allah because Muhammad said that he'd been made victorious with terror. Muhammad put a constant emphasis on martyrdom as the greatest thing you can do, the thing that will get you the greatest reward in paradise, and called for the violent subjugation of the entire world. And we're not allowed to address that either, right? So think about this. You have all of these ideas that are leading to violence. We're the people who are saying, hey, we need to examine the ideas to refute the ideas. And other people are saying, no, you're not allowed to talk about them. You're either in the category of, the ideas are either in the white supremacist category, in which case we just deplatform them, or it's in the Islamic category, in which case they're protected from all criticism. So what happens? Well, no one who has those views ever gets refuted using that methodology. So what happens? More and more terrorist attacks. That's what happens.
Absolutely. That's where it always leads. We just need to be able to sit down and talk like adults, like 21st century adults.
Yeah, and for those people who are saying, but there will still be people like that. That's true, right? That's true. You do have people who are just going to be violent no matter what. But lots of the people who are convinced into this perspective, you can convince them out of it, right? Or you can stop them from being convinced in the first place if you're allowed to have a discussion about it beforehand, right? In other words, keep in mind, I used to be a violent person, right? I changed my views. I don't think like that anymore. People can change. If you're not allowed to even have the discussion, then guess what? You're not, when you stop these guys, when you deplatform these guys, at least when they're on some website or something like that, you can see it, right? You can see what they're saying. You have a record of it. When you say you're no longer allowed to have a website, guess what? You're not stopping them. They're just going to do it in other ways, right? They're going to go do it through, talking to people and stuff like that. But, they'll find ways to talk about their views on the internet. But the point is, now it's no longer public where we can publicly address it, right? If they are not allowed to say anything in public, how do we say, here's what's being claimed so that we can refute it? You can't. And so you can't respond to Islam. You can't respond to the ideology, and you don't respond to the ideology of white supremacists either, because you just deplatform them, right? That's what you do. That's how you respond to them. And so this is just a weird situation here. All right, here's a go ahead, and then we have a question here.
No, I just wanted to say, I kind of wanted to tie that to that most people in our time are not fond of violence. They don't like violence. They don't want to go out. I mean, I'm talking about the West especially, or European culture in general. People from European cultures don't like violence. They don't like to resort to violence. They don't like to go out and take people's lives. They don't even want to go out and take the lives of animals. They're so They have values that are much greater than that. So there are two things. I don't believe that even if violent people, violent racists, went out and kept talking and spreading their ideas, there wouldn't be many people adopting their ideas and going out and killing other people. Most people would never do that. Most people, no matter how they think about Muslims, how they think about immigrants, whatever they think, they wouldn't do that. They just don't want that. It's completely proven that we have become much more peaceful here. And most people, no matter what they think, don't want to take lives, don't want to harm other people. It's just not a thing that people want to do anymore.
And by the way, that was the main reason for the numbers of the KKK plummeting over time.
Yeah.
Was when it was being put forward, right? When it was being put forward, it's, hey guys, here's an organization. You've got blacks and whites, but the blacks have been given their freedom. We need to make sure that we maintain control here and stuff. And that appealed to a lot of people. When they started going around and killing people, and one of the leaders even tortured and raped a woman and stuff like that, then people, once that was, these guys are actually some sick, violent dudes, people started leaving. People started leaving left and right. Because as you point out, people don't want that, right? If you say, hey, I want to be in charge here and I want to make sure my group is in charge. There were still enough people in the United States who thought like that back then. That could be a big movement. But as soon as they started saying some really sick stuff, we don't want anything to do with this.
But that's why in the West we have values. We don't like violence, and we need to keep it that way. We need to keep the West as it is. That's why we need to stay away from Islam.
Yeah, that's a good idea. That should be a meme.
Yeah.
All right, here's a quick question, and then we're gonna we'll just read a couple lines from some news reports about some of these other terrorist attacks.
Okay.
But Christian True Believer said, how do we stop them from taking over the United States? You can see that they're trying to implement it into our school, and just watching Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, wrong spelling in their name. If you're talking about Muslims here, guys, keep in mind, Muslims are not taking over the country. There are certain places in Europe where you could be worried about, Islam taking over. In the United States, Muslims make up like 1% of the population, right? So don't think that they're taking over. Now, certain ideas and shutting down criticism and stuff like that. So Islamic influence, you could be worried about. If it's like influencing people's rights and things like that, and our ability to respond to it, then that's something that we should be worried about. But as far as what you should do, you're saying, how do we stop them? Well, keep in mind, the United States is a democracy. And someone's going to go, no, it's a constitutional republic, man. Yeah, but it's a form of democracy. You go out and vote on things, right? You vote on who goes in power, right? That's what I mean by democracy here. Everything, and I've emphasized this in previous videos, in a place like the United States, everything comes down to having an informed population of free people, right? If you are worried about bias in the media, bias in the education system, bias in Hollywood, bias in the political realm, then you need an informed population of free people that fixes that problem instantly, right? Because politicians, they get voted out. They get voted, people that you trust get voted in. Places like CNN, they're businesses. CNN's ratings have been plummeting. They're plummeting because people are getting fed up with being fed nonsense. Guess what? CNN either adapts and starts getting some people who speak the truth, or they die, right? You don't get advertising revenue if you don't have viewers. So the education system, if you say, hey, that school over here isn't trying to brainwash my kid, but that school is, I'm going to send my kids where they actually get a good education and don't simply get brainwashed. If enrollment plummets, you have to adapt. So all of these sort of pillars of communication in our society, they're all controlled by us. So that's why we're doing this right here. That's why AP is doing what he does. This is what I'm doing. We're trying to build a population of informed people. Now the problem is, what do we have? We have like YouTube channels, right? We have YouTube channels, right? On the opposition side has like all the media, all politicians across the board, Hollywood, right? They've got some major powerhouses on their side. So anyway, the fact that people end up agreeing with us if we actually have the discussion shows that you could still do this, right? You could still do this. Like even though we don't have those massive power centers, when people start hearing the reality, they're like, well, actually, you make more sense. You make more sense than what they're saying on CNN. Matter of fact, what CNN is saying, that's just stupid, and I don't want to watch CNN anymore, right? That's what's happening. And so we just need to keep doing this, and more people need to get involved. Yeah, go ahead.
I saw a study before. Sorry, I saw a study before which said that that most people say that they trust YouTubers much more than they trust the media.
Yeah, yeah. And I do too. Again, I got so sick of watching people on the news that I now usually get my daily news of what's going on that I might care about in the world from Tim Pool, a YouTuber. Why? I don't agree with Tim Pool on a bunch of things. There are a bunch of issues that I would not agree with on him on politically, but I trust that he's at least trying to be honest. When I'm watching CNN, I do not trust that they're even trying or attempting to be honest, right? So I would much rather have someone that I disagree with on all kinds of positions, but I believe the person is trying to be truthful. I would much rather listen to someone like that. And so people's attention are turning to the alternative news, right? So platforms like YouTube and so on. But guess what? That's going to increase eventually. Yeah. We're close to a tipping point, right? We're close to a tipping point where if we just get a little more, right? Get a little more of the population on board, I think it's gonna start falling down like dominoes. And so I believe we can have a massive shift in a very short amount of time. What do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely trust YouTubers more, especially this one guy who's known as Apostate Prophet. Has an awesome channel. He also has cups like this.
Really?
If you've ever seen that,
yeah.
It says "Stay away from Islam."
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
How could I get one of those?
You just need to ask me.
No, I mean, like how would a person get one of those?
Oh, you just need to go. There are many ways to do that. You just need to go on merch.apostateprophet.com. There you can get it very, very quickly with just 2 clicks or 3.
Wow.
Maybe 4, I don't know. Or you can just go on the Apostate Prophet YouTube channel, and then you can, from any video below in the description, you can reach the merch channel and can buy your cups there right away.
Has this ever happened to you? You're trying to drink water, and what's the solution to this problem? Well, if you go to merch, Apostate Prophet, you can get something to hold that water and not spill it all over yourself. You can avoid all these embarrassing incidents. Anyway.
Yes.
And it's got a handy message on there. All right.
Don't forget to smash the like button, by the way. Wage Jihad on the like button, everyone.
Oh, yeah. Everyone hit that like button if you haven't hit it already. And all right. Let's... Yep, we got a few more minutes. Let's go ahead and zoom through a couple of these stories here. I'm just going to read a little bit. Do I have the technology here? Yes, I do. All right, so Sunnyvale crash suspect targeted people he believed were Muslim, police say. So let's check out this story real quick. This is in California. Now, I noticed that all the stories we're about to look at are from California, right? This is supposed to be this liberal paradise, this leftist paradise. And terrorism is exploding on all sides there. No pun intended. CNN, the driver accused of intentionally hitting a group of pedestrians in Northern California attacked people he believed were Muslims, police said. New evidence shows that Isaiah Joel Peoples also targeted the crowd based on race. Let's skip down. Peoples, 34, has been charged with 8 counts of attempted murder for allegedly driving his vehicle into pedestrians in Sunnyvale earlier this week. If convicted, Peoples faces up to life in prison. So here he is. And this guy, I read another story. I don't know if it's in here, but this guy, Peoples is a religious man who is praying for the people who were injured. So this guy realized they weren't Muslims, and so he's a real religious dude. So now he's praying for these people that he mistakenly killed. Now, suspect is an Army veteran headed to Bible study. If I recall correctly, this guy was, so he's a veteran, and he had apparently, what's that called? Post-traumatic stress disorder and so on. So with that situation, it's not exactly clear how much you should attribute to his ideology. So he's killing people based on their race and trying to get Muslims because of their religion, and gets the wrong people. I've known a couple people with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Yeah.
And they do have some serious issues. So in this case, not sure how much you would associate with his ideology versus him being in just kind of a messed up guy. But at the end of the day, he could have gone after anyone. He wanted to target Muslims. This guy, I believe, had served in Afghanistan and decided to kill a bunch of Muslims. And guys, that is, I mean, think about one. It's stupid enough if you decide you're just going to go kill a bunch of random Muslims who have nothing to do with anything. And then you're so sloppy, you accidentally run over a bunch of like completely random people.
What an idiot.
Yeah, it's like you're evil for wanting to go kill a bunch of people,
Yeah.
and then you're an idiot because you don't do anything that you wanted to do, right? You're an evil and an idiot. Again, there are people who have mental health problems because of things they've been through, or just they were born that way. So yeah, this is a sad situation, but guys,
There are some conflicting reports though about his intentions, whether he really wanted to kill Muslims or not. I think his lawyer has come out and said that the whole talk about killing Muslims and hate crime is something the police said, but that he, as his lawyer, can't confirm because this guy apparently is someone who likes Muslims and who is close to Muslims, who has Muslim relatives. And
Oh,
who has,
okay. Well, that's
had
interesting.
before. That's a report that I've just seen when we were talking, and yeah. There are conflicting reports about what's really happening, and they even say that he might have some mental issues.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll have to have more on that story. But what was initially reported is this guy decided to go run down a bunch of Muslims. Didn't realize these people aren't Muslims. Ended up running down a bunch of people. Mm-hmm. That would be one thing if it was just one random guy, but it's the fact that these things are happening like back to back to back. That's the part that is a concern here, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, after that we have the FBI attack. I mean, not the headline here is about the FBI looking into this synagogue attack, but let's check this out. The FBI said on Monday it received multiple tips about a security threat minutes before a gunman opened fire in a California synagogue, killing a woman and wounding 3 others, but lacked sufficient details or time to prevent the attack. So with this one, this was apparently some sort of white supremacist who was going to wanted to go kill some Jews. Is that what you took away from?
Yeah, he even he wrote a manifesto. It was clearly inspired by Brenton Tarrant in Christchurch in New Zealand. This guy wrote a manifesto which is even dumber than the manifesto in New Zealand, but it basically says completely insane things. Like he's at first proudly declaring that he's of completely white heritage and so on, and then he's talking about how the Jews are trying to destroy the countries of the white people, and how the Jews are planning this big replacement, and every Jew is guilty. Every single Jew out there who is called a Jew, who calls himself a Jew, is guilty of the same thing. There are no innocent Jews. They all need to be punished and so on. It's
what is let's get your thoughts on Jews real quick, because isn't it weird that like they are the most targeted group in the United States, right? Like per capita, right? So you have more attacks. You have more attacks against certain groups, but per capita, in other words, per individual, Jews are by far the most targeted group, right? In other words, in things like hate crimes and hate attacks and stuff like that, Jews per capita are the most common target. And it's from people who are saying things like that. You're trying to take over everything, man. You're trying to take over. What do you think about that?
It is insane. It goes back to theories that are so old. I mean, it goes back to theories not only from Nazi times, not only Nazi propaganda, but also to many themes to many many kinds of propaganda that was around much longer before that. There has always been this obsession with how the Jews want to disrupt, want to destroy the world, want to own the world and control everything. How they have all the money, how they own all the money. Every single piece of money that you get into your hands, a Jew touched that, and all that kind of nonsense. It's ridiculous today. I mean, what's the population of Jews? Is it like 15 million or so?
Yeah, I think it's like 17 million, like globally. And there are people who. It's just amazing how. I mean, it reminds me of the situation with Christianity in that anywhere you go in the world, people find a reason. Lots of people find a reason not to like Christians, right? So if you go to China, communist places, well, Christians are standing in the way of the the uprising, and so Christians are bad because religion is the opiate of the masses, right? Christianity, teaches people to just be calm and stay in line, and you can't get a violent revolution really if people are taking Christianity seriously. So you have to do away with Christians. In the Muslim world, Christians are the main alternative to Islam, and the Quran orders Muslims to fight and subjugate them and so on. In the West, hey, Christians are going to end science. They're going to ruin science. They're going to get in the way of science. So you have to stop. They're going to try and take over and enforce Christianity on you. So wherever you go, you got that. But you have this parallel with the Jews that wherever they go, someone's got to, like in the Islamic world, they really, really hate the Jews. But then you've got all of these guys now. Saying that Jews have to be attacked for all of these reasons. By the way, there's a reason that Jews ended up in certain professions. Their religion kept them from having certain occupations that other people could have, right? Like they couldn't touch certain things, they couldn't deal with certain unclean things and so on. So they gravitated towards professions where they weren't doing those kinds of things. But then once they're in those professions, they do them well, and then everyone points a finger. You see, they're taking all the awesome jobs and stuff like that, and so they're parasites. They're being parasitic. That was the claim of the Nazis. But you have similar claims even now. And wow, just the idea that you got some Jews in a synagogue, and I'm going to go shoot them all to get my point across. For me, the most terrifying part right there is just that. He said, yeah, given what that guy did in New Zealand, I saw, hey, this is the way forward. That's what I was just saying I was terrified of, right? The idea that everyone's going to be a copycat now, right? Wow, look at how that guy got his manifesto across. I have a manifesto too. I wrote it in class when I was supposed to be paying attention to other things, but, I got my manifesto. I want my voice to be heard, and all I have to do is get a gun and go kill a bunch of people, and then I'll be famous. Bunch of losers, man. Total losers.
What a great way to get out there and really make a change in this world.
Yeah.
What is that kid? 19 years old. He's 19 years old.
This guy had his entire life ahead of him. And then, he wrote this in his manifesto. I don't know if you've read it through. I haven't read it through. I've just looked at a few parts of it, and I just found it so absolutely ridiculous. I mean, in that manifesto in New Zealand, I actually read it through because I really wanted to know what's going on. But I looked at this guy's manifesto, and it was just so much nonsense, completely kind of copied from that New Zealand guy. No reasons at all. Happy family, happy life. Thinks he's going to do something. He's going to change the world by walking into a synagogue and shooting around. All that is happening is that he'll be charged, and everyone will just know him as this big idiot. Yeah, and again, that's the. Man, think about that, right? Because this is the situation we had with jihadis. Just even a couple of years ago, people kept saying that, these Islamic terrorist attacks are because, they're all these super poor Muslims, and this allows someone to come in and, feed them and take care of them, but radicalize them in the process. And so if we just deal with the problem of hunger and starvation, stuff like that, and global warming, of course, that was an argument for a little while, then we can fix the problem of jihad. And it was total nonsense, right? The Sri Lanka guys ranged from middle class to upper middle class to super rich, right? Mm-hmm. That's who these guys were. I mean, Bin Laden was insanely rich. Osama bin Laden was insanely rich. His number two was a doctor, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, these guys are well educated and they're well off compared to lots of other people in the position. That mean that, and so now you have the same situation where you've got a guy who has a good normal upbringing and stuff, and he decides, you know what, I'm 19 now, it's time to go on a killing spree.
Yeah. In England, we have so many mosques that that we know of. I just read about this one guy who is a former terrorist, and I read a little bit about his his experience, what he told the media, where he was radicalized, and so on. And I saw one example there, and I went on from there to look into more mosques in the UK that are known as mosques that have recruited radicals, that have recruited jihadists, and there are so many of them.
Yeah.
There are so many known mosques in the UK that are known for recruiting jihadists and sending them to Syria, to Iraq, or letting them blow up here, and nothing is done against those mosques. And when you look at those mosques, they have massive fundings. They are owned by massive groups, and they're not poor or anything. They just recruit people in the streets who look for a purpose in life and can't find any purpose besides going into this mosque, getting your head filled with nonsense and blowing yourself up in the streets. It's not about how these people are socially, how these people are poor or how these people don't have the same standards and this and that. It's certainly not about that. It's ridiculous whenever it goes into that direction. That's certainly not true.
Yeah. All right, we're going to look at one more failed. Well, this one thankfully was a failed attack. But wanted to look at one comment real quick. It's from Daniel C., who says, Zoanist equals Satanism. Zoanist. Now notice, Daniel, you didn't even spell Zionist right. But two, if you want to object to Zionism or something like that, right? Zionism is the claim that, the Jews have, a homeland in Israel and things like that. And the position was Jews should keep moving there and stuff until they have a Jewish homeland. You take white nationalists, right? You got white nationalists, and their position is that white people need a homeland because white people are going to be, cease to exist or something like that. If anyone has ever had a good argument that they need a place, right? And I'm not affirming the position right here. I'm just saying try to understand the position. If anyone has ever had a place to say, we need a place of our own where we can protect ourselves, it's the Jews here, right? Because think about it. They were in the population. In Europe. And the claim would be, you don't need your own place. You don't need your own land. What are you talking about? Your governments will protect you. Governments stuck them in ovens, right? Governments stuck these people in ovens. And even a place like the United States, who's the most targeted group of hate crimes? Jews, right? Yes. So wherever Jews go, there are people in massive numbers who hate them. And again, the response would be, you don't need a place of your own where you can look after your own group. We'll protect you. The Jews can say, you liars, no, you didn't, right? Keep in mind, it's not just the Nazis who were doing this. It was other groups that weren't taking them in when the things were happening, weren't protecting them when they're happening. So Jews, more than any other group that I'm aware of, can say, no, we have decisive proof that if someone rises up, and we know there are plenty of people who hate, if someone rallies all those haters and says, I want to stick these Jews in ovens, the rest of you aren't going to do anything about it. We know that. So we need a land. So I wouldn't call that Satan. I wouldn't call the view that, hey, we need a place where we cannot be thrown in ovens. I wouldn't call that Satanism.
It's very ironic.
If I did want to, I would at least spell it right. But go ahead.
Absolutely. It's very ironic. The history of the founding of Israel, of the new Israel. The whole fuss in the Islamic world about Israel was that the Jews are coming into this Arab land and slowly taking over this land of the Arabs and buying land and establishing their own country. Because why would Jews do that? Jews can live anywhere else. They can just live somewhere else. They can just have their own states somewhere else. They can live in other countries. They don't need their own state in this Arab land. Why would they Why would they take land from the Arabs? And as a reaction to that, to that stealing land claim, what happened is that Jews all across the Islamic world were punished for the Zionist movement, for the establishing of Israel. It's very ironic. The Arab world thinks Zionism is completely stupid. Jews need to stay out of here. They all need to go back. Jews can live anywhere else. And because Jews don't listen, I will make them listen and therefore persecute all the Jews in my country. Great. And that's why all the Jews in the Islamic world have made an exodus and moved to Israel. Now there's pretty much no Jewish population in most Arab countries, in most Muslim countries, although there was a big Jewish population in many countries before. So that kind of proved the point. And if you really want to come now and say that Zionism is Satanism, it's I don't know what to say about that anymore.
Wild stuff. All right, one more thing. One more look at this last story real quick, and then we'll.
Sorry, I meant Zionism.
Zionism, or Zionism.
Yeah, I apologize.
Get it right next time. You got to be a good bigot. Sorry.
Yeah. All right.
So let's look at this story real quick. So this was the failed attack. So L.A. terror plot thwarted. Army vet planned mass casualties, FBI says. Now, this is interesting because this was a guy who converted to Islam at the beginning of March. So that was last month. Now we're at the end of April, and he was already trying to bomb a bunch of people. So let's just go ahead and read a couple lines here. A U.S. Army veteran who wanted revenge for attacks on Muslims around the globe. Notice it's, hey, Muslims around the globe are being targeted. Not nearly as much as Muslims are targeting everyone else, but still, how dare they?
How dare they?
How dare anyone react to all the Islamic terrorist attacks? Muslims around the globe was planning to detonate a bomb at a Long Beach rally this past weekend before he was intercepted by law enforcement officials, authorities said Monday. Mark Stephen Domingo, 26 years old. Guys, another super young guy who, in theory, would have his entire life ahead of him and is ready to throw everything away in order to end other people's lives, other people who had their whole lives ahead of them. Mark Stephen Domingo, 26, was arrested Friday night after he took delivery of what he thought was an improvised explosive device from an undercover law enforcement officer posing as a bomb maker. Now, this happened multiple times in New York, I remember, and in many other places where you decide that you want to bomb people, but you don't know how to make bombs, and that's a long process, right? You have to figure out how to make bombs, and then you have to buy all the right supplies and stuff. That stuff takes a long time. That's why it's utterly ridiculous to think that Sri Lanka attack was just thought up as retaliation. That was people working for a long time. It takes a lot of time and a lot of work to build a bunch of bombs and stuff like that. So anyway, the situation is, well, you don't want to go through all the long process of figuring out how to make bombs and stuff and take the time. And so you talk to someone else who can get you bombs. And so you start looking around for people. Hey, can you get me a bomb? And pretty quickly you run into an undercover agent. So from an undercover law enforcement officer posing as a bomb maker, officials said he was charged with attempting to provide material support to terrorists and, if convicted, could face up to 15 years in prison. Well, that's good. He'll be out. And 5 or 10 years.
Yeah.
According to a federal affidavit, Domingo considered various attacks, including targeting Jews, shocker, churches, and police officers, before he decided to detonate an IED at a rally scheduled to take place in Long Beach this past weekend. I don't know if it's in this article, but I saw somewhere else that he was apparently going to attack some sort of white nationalist gathering or something like that. I haven't verified that. That's just what I saw. So I saw somewhere. I saw someone say that. I think it was Tim Pool, actually. But if that's correct, here's what actually happened. So there was supposed to be some white nationalist rally or something like this. This guy went and planted the bomb there. It turned out to be a fake bomb, so no one actually got killed. But the white nationalists didn't even show up. A bunch of leftist protesters showed up to protest the white nationalists who never actually showed up. So he would have ended up killing a bunch of leftist protesters. This is like that other guy. If he was actually intending to mow down Muslims with his car, and then he ends up killing all the people he didn't intend to. It's like, again, it's if you want to go out just killing people you disagree with, then that's evil. But then if you're just getting all the wrong people, you're stupid and evil. And this guy, I mean, over and over again. We saw this in New York, where people would decide to go on a killing spree, but they don't know where to get certain weapons or bombs or something like this, and they end up dealing with federal agents who give them fake stuff, and then when they go out and try to launch their attack, then they go to jail for a long time. All right, so guys, that's the situation we're in. Plenty more terrorist attacks in April, in April, but the terrifying trend is, for years we've been hearing primarily about Islamic attacks. You have the rare exceptions like Anders Breivik's attack and so on, and you do have lots of little terrorist attacks that usually don't end up in getting anyone killed, right? So you've had white supremacists and stuff like this doing terrorist attacks in the past, but it's blowing up someone's car when they're not in it or something like that. That's a terrorist attack, right? The attacks that are involving casualties are now not just coming from the Islamic side. Now lots of other people are killing. So, final thoughts, AP, before we close out here.
Don't go out and kill. I mean, we have said this so often before, but it's really an important thing to say. There are so many ways that problems can be solved, no matter how much you consider those, no matter how big those problems are, no matter what it is that you consider a problem. We can always come together, sit down like adults in the 21st century, especially adults in the West, and can come together and discuss things like reasonable people. We can solve problems. We can try to solve problems, no matter how much we believe that a problem is a very, very huge problem and it can't be solved through talking, because there is really no point in talking. We can really sit down and talk. We need to sit down and talk. We need to be able to sit down and talk. Big corporations, big corporate entities like Twitter and Facebook and all the other ones, YouTube, that we are here always gladly using, need to recognize that we need to be able to talk in order for such things not to happen in the future. And killing people is never right. Killing people is being completely stupid, completely useless, being the lowest form of human, being the scum of society that no one will like in the future. No one will go out and think, oh, I am so glad that this guy went into this house of worship and shot 50 to 60 people. We are so glad. On this day, let's celebrate this wonderful hero who shot up an entire mosque or a synagogue. No one will think that. The future, the people will despise that person. No one likes that. I don't know what those people are thinking. I don't know what kind of fantasy world they are living in. But no one really wants to know such a person. No one wants to be associated with such a person. No one wants to be saved or helped by such a person. Killing people is never okay. And in order to prevent all these things, in order to prevent future killings, in order to just get rid of this entire problem of killing, we need to be able to come together and talk. We need to be able to talk about every problem there is, no matter how sensitive it is. No matter how much people consider that it is sensitive, like Islam is an issue, race issues are an issue, whatever it is, skin color is an issue. If people consider skin color a very sensitive issue, then let's come together and talk about it and talk about why it is a sensitive issue. Talk about why opinions people have about skin color are probably not appropriate, why there is a better way of thinking. Let's talk about these things. Let's not shut down. Let's not silence. Let's not ask for silence. Let's not ask for killings. That leads nowhere. And especially you and I are here to address one certain ideology all the time, because we know that certain ideology contributes so much to a mentality where you can't talk, where you need to fight, where you need to kill, where you need to express stuff with violence because talking is not permitted. And that is Islam. And this shouldn't be a controversial thing to say. If some people think this is very sensitive, that this is very controversial, then we should come together and discuss why it is controversial and what could be and what we could say instead. We shouldn't shut this down. That said, also Zionism is not bad. So that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I had one comment on the Zionism. So Ziv here said Zionism is nothing like white nationalism. I think because I said like white nationalism. No, I'm not saying Zionism is like white nationalism. I'm pointing out that the claims that are made by white nationalists for the need for a white homeland, you have parallel claims by Jews at certain times. But I'm saying it really made sense for the Jews to say that, right, after they're being thrown in ovens. You have some issues with with white people in like South Africa and stuff like that who are just being targeted because of the color of their skin. You have situations like that, but you don't. There is no serious attempt to wipe out white people. What white nationalists are worried about is other races sort of outbreeding them, right? Having higher birth rates, and therefore white people will make up a smaller and smaller percentage of the population, and white people will interbreed, and pretty soon there are just no white people. They're worried about that. Well, notice that is if other, you don't have a moral obligation to people who don't exist, right? So if you're talking about, hey, I'm worried about a future generation of white guy 1,000 years in the future, and he's totally outnumbered or something like that. We don't have moral obligations to non-existent people, right? The situation with white nationalists and worried about they're going to get, they're going to be outnumbered. That's just, you're talking about the percentages of various groups in a population. I don't care, right? I don't care, right? If there is a white person who is here, right? If there is a white person who is here, yes, you don't violate his rights, don't kill him, things like that. If you're saying, man, I need my own homeland so that there won't be brown people around my, great grandson, that's ridiculous, right? I find that ridiculous. So anyway, the point is, the arguments that white nationalists are using, right? We're being wiped out. We're being destroyed here. They're annihilating us. Those are not true of white people, right? You can make a claim that given birth rates of certain groups and stuff like this, that your population is going to be reduced or something like that. But the guys, that happens throughout history. That happens throughout history. So the point here is, the claims that are being made by white nationalists say we really have to do something here. We really need a homeland. If you're going to accept that argument from anyone, you would have to accept it from Jews, because it was absolutely correct that there were people trying to annihilate them, trying to eradicate their population. And so anyway, that was the point.
Well, I want to say as a Nazi, I'm just kidding. Don't.
Everyone just cut that little part out. As a Nazi, I want to say, and then combine it with something else, and then that's how you get him deplatformed.
Yeah. Don't do that.
As a Turkish Nazi.
As a Turkish Nazi. I'm a Zionist. But no, not as anything. Just forget that as anything part. I understand where white nationalists are coming from. It's. I would even say there is in and of itself nothing that wrong with the idea of white nationalism, with thinking about white nationalism. It's not about, the idea itself is not about violence. It's not about going around and killing people. Mm-hmm. It's not rooted in violence. Yeah. The thing is that it is very often interpreted with violence. Mm-hmm. And even if people have such opinions, even if people care about what they call a white nationalist outlook, they should just not resort to violence. They should be able to come together and form sentences, form their ideas, form their opinions, and properly have discussions about these things. But in order to have these discussions, we also have to really, every other side every side come together and participate in these discussions. We need to make these discussions possible. If a white nationalist is not liked by the majority of the population, if his ideas are not liked, if the majority of the people don't like white nationalist ideas, then we need to be able to come together and explain why people don't like white nationalist ideas, even to a white nationalist, instead of shutting him down, putting him into a corner, and leaving him no chance but to do absolutely stupid things that no one loves to see. That's all I have to say for today.
All right, thank you for everyone for joining us here. Thank you, AP. And so we've seen a lot about terrorism. I want to say, everyone, stay away from white supremacy. Stay away from white supremacy. AP, do you have any advice for any other groups we've been discussing?
Oh, absolutely. Stay away from Islam.
All right, you heard it, and he's the Apostate Prophet, so you have to listen to him.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, everyone. We'll see you next time.